We're talking about the situation in Southport and how, of course, that has developed now that Axel Rudakubana pled guilty yesterday. Well, we've heard about Keir Starmer. He's addressed the nation today. Also, the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, she speaking to us today. Take a listen.
The Met Commissioner has warned about young men who are fixated on violence grazing across extremist and terrorist content online. And Five Eyes counter-terror partners have warned about growing radicalisation of minors, happening as so many of our children and teenagers are being exposed to ever more disturbing materials online, an online ecosystem that is radicalising our children while safety measures are whittled away.
What's your reaction and thoughts to that, Jacqueline?
I think it's escalated in terms of the amount of stuff that's available online. But I still go back to, I do not believe that this has worsened just in the last couple of years in terms of these lone wolves as such. And we've heard it all. I mean, we've heard all of this before, and I think the line came up in the end, and it was always lessons to be learned. I mean, we can take this back to Lockerbie. We can take the rise of extremism back 30 years. I mean, we had, 40 years of the IRA, frankly, that were bombing us off the mainland. So it's not like we're not used to being attacked in this country. But the trouble is, I think this is where the whole woke agenda came in terms of people being, I'm talking about the escalation of this, because people were being fearful about mentioning different races or different religions. That has got to stop, because we have to face facts as they are. And I will still go back to the fact, I do think that this young man knew what he was doing. What he actually did and who he did it to, young girls, fits in very well with this modus operandi of these Islamic terrorists. And I think that's the mantle that he has taken. Now, obviously, we'll hear an awful lot more when the judge comes forward with a whole lot more of information. But I don't think that we should be tippy-toeing around all of this. And I think a public inquiry is the right way to go. And as a side issue, when we've looked at, which isn't for tonight, but when we looked at these grooming gangs and what's gone on over 30 years with that, where children have also died as a consequence of being attacked, then in my view, this is another reason why we need a public inquiry that should also be wide-ranging into the attacks on young people in this country.
Yeah, let me play you a clip about Yvette Cooper, actually, because she was talking tough about this public inquiry. Take a listen.
There were so many signs of how dangerous he had become, yet the action against him was far too weak. So families need the truth about why the system failed to tackle his violence for so many years. That is why we are setting up an independent public inquiry.
Honestly, right, this will get me into trouble saying this, but the more I listen to stuff, the more I listen, oh yeah, public inquiry, with Prevent has failed and this guy was a wrong 'un and so many mischances. I'm so fed up of it, I'm reaching the point where I almost look at this and I think, surely, just give this guy, this is going to come out of my mouth and I can hear the abuse that's going to come my way, the death penalty. This will be on the tongues of so many people now. You've got people like this that seem to think that they can jump in a taxi and target little girls, admit to having done that, and then be paid by you, I, and all my viewers, the taxpayers, to languish in prison. I mean, why?
So, quickly on that, I want to come back to something that Jacqueline said. I don't support the death penalty because sometimes it goes wrong. Obviously, it's not going to have gone wrong in this case. But
so
it's
let's talk about this case for him. Would you not support it for him?
No, because I wouldn't support it for anyone. And how do you start doing it? I think it's easier to say that he should stay in prison for the rest of his life, and he shouldn't be. He might even prefer to be killed by the death penalty. We don't know. But can I just come back to something that Jacqueline said about this is obviously an Islamist thing. To me, it seems more like a school shooting, a US-style school shooting type attack, and he was also looking at lots of material, apparently, according to the trial, of school shooting attacks. So I think he shouldn't be categorised as having been an Islamist because he doesn't appear to have been one.
Young girls, machetes. I mean, this is a real MO when you have looked at the knife attacks. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is. It's not me making it up.
I'm not saying you're making it up, and I'm not saying, obviously, he has learnt from lots of different types of violence, including Islamist violence, very clearly.
Well,
he
clearly
downloaded the stuff.
It was a huge influence because that's the method that he used.
I'm not saying it isn't, but he was not an Islamist, and he wasn't. This is why I think that changing the definition of terrorism is...
Well, you don't know if he was or not. I mean,
we
don't know.
Fine, there's no evidence evidence that has been brought forward that he...
We don't know that.
I mean, that he's anything other than...
Anyway, I mean, it's we don't know that. We'll get more information, I think, from the judge.
But there's never been presented with any information that he's Muslim.
Anyway, we're not here to defend... I mean, I'm not here to defend him. I mean,
my point is...
We need to move on to the accountability. I think what Michelle has said. I mean, this guy wasn't under the radar. Like others who...
I know, that's how I started
this. He wasn't under that. And he'd obviously been excluded from school for quite a few years. Mm-hmm. And then his father had to stop him going on a 15-mile journey, with a knife to go back to school and all of this. So in all of these things, we all look back and go, lessons to it, but there's never accountability. Who is actually... There are people here who are responsible for also allowing this to happen. Obviously, he's got his own family, and he, the perpetrator, is always the one to blame. That's quite right. But there are others... here, and we know security services are trying to keep their eye on thousands and thousands of people in this country, and it must be a very difficult job. But this really isn't good enough. I mean, it just is not good enough. This was avoidable, and so many of these things are avoidable.
One of the things that stuck out to me, I heard Keir Starmer repeatedly saying today, this needs to be a line in the sand for Britain. It was a line in the sand for Britain quite some time ago. The moment it happened, it was a line in the sand for Britain. You might have noticed everyone then very quickly got called far right if they dared to express themselves on the streets. And no, I'm not condoning people rioting. I'm talking about the people that actually just took to the streets to protest. He goes on to say, when he's talking about his line in the sand for Britain, that we need to have a change, how Britain protects citizens and children. But you see, all of this comes about on a backdrop where you can be sent to prison in this country for sending a tweet criticising the government's approach to something on one hand, but yet on the other hand, you can sit and look at child abuse imagery. You can be convicted of having created and distributed this stuff. And guess what happens to you? Pretty much nothing. You'll be sat at home watching whatever it is that you're watching on television. You won't be behind bars. And if you're serious about actually trying to protect children in this country, which I really do think we should be, you should be starting right at the very, very basics of saying that children are the most vulnerable, precious things that we have in our society that cannot look after themselves in any way, shape or form, and that we start today by saying, you know what, we're going to do a root and branch reform when it comes to this whole thing. If you look at any visual harm of children, never mind if you go out and do any visual harm, thank you very much, if you even start looking at this stuff, considering looking at this stuff behind bars for you, that's what I would like to see. Then I might take some of this stuff a little bit more serious. And I'm warming up now into this thought about the death penalty for people like this. Somebody needs to convince me why on earth the best outcome for this chap, Axel Rudakubana, when he's sentenced on Thursday, is goodness knows how many years behind bars at the cost of God knows how many millions to the taxpayers. Why? To what end? Just because people can say, we're better than them, Michelle. Brilliant. Get rid of them.
European Convention on Human Rights. I mean, this is where the death penalty was kicked into touch. And, of course, many, many years ago, Ruth Ellis, that was the last woman that was hanged. And, of course, in those days, they didn't have the forensics that they have now, so there were some people who were hanged, and of course they were innocent. I have never supported the total abolition of the death penalty personally, because I think it should be available for example, the Moors murderers. For cases like this, well, this boy was underage, this teenager, but terrorist acts. I just think that there could be exceptional circumstances, and then people wouldn't be languid. But of course, you know, the whole mood changed, and that's the decision, and this is what the UK now do.
Well, look, you know, I'm talking about cases where there is no reasonable doubt. There's no doubt whatsoever that this person has committed this crime. You've got very advanced DNA in society now. You've often got CCTV of people doing stuff. I remember the Lee Rigby killers. Why? What were they sitting behind bars for? To achieve what? Get rid of them. That's what I would like to see in this society. The problem is people will be ranting a rib and getting in touch, emailing me now saying, what an extremist that makes me. This world is upside down sometimes, isn't it? Anyway, look, I apologise for my rants. There's something about these topics when it involves children like this. It really infuriates me, saddens me, sickens me, as I know it does many of you.